Thanks, Lavi. Yeah, actually, there is a little change. So our group has been acquired by NCS Group. So now my new title is Apps Engineering Practice Principal for Queensland, Western Australia, and Northern Territory, which is quite a mouthful. But NCS Group is a global IT consulting business. Yeah, so, that's okay. I do not. So today's agenda, so we will start with how I started with Flutter, then we will quickly move on to the pros of Flutter, and we'll then share like our journey through a recent Flutter app we just released. Then after that, we will like briefly talk about the cons of Flutter, then conclude. So I actually started as an Android developer many years ago. Then during that time, I developed a few Android apps, and one of the Android app was a free app to help people remember names. And I always wanted to create an app for iOS as well, but then it was quite difficult for me because I'm still not an iOS developer. So when the pandemic started in 2020, people started working from home, so I thought I would have so much time. Then I started working on this like paid app for remember names. Then within 2 months, I was able to finish it like in my spare time, then release it to both Android and iOS. So yeah, this app started as an app to help people remember names, but then very quickly I found that I can help like people to organize their contacts. So with like you can use multiple tags to quickly find the people. You can easily group people and find people, which is very useful. So I added some like new features, and there's a quiz, and also there is an in-app purchase feature for this one. So yeah, so I think started from 2020. I started like developing apps with Flutter, and I really enjoyed it. And so as I just mentioned, I think one of the biggest pros of Flutter is like there is one code base for multiple platforms. You are no longer restricted to whatever you can whatever like code or framework you use. So you are no longer say if you are Android, you can only develop apps for Android or iOS. But now with Flutter, you can make an app for Android, iOS, desktop, or web, which is amazing. Again, there are like tons of articles on the pros of Flutter, so I won't spend too much time here. Then the next pro is like, because Flutter compiles to native code, so the performance is amazing. And then like it also ensures the user experience is very well received by the users as well. And for developers, I think the nicest feature is hot reload. When I was an Android developer, sometimes like I had to wait 20 minutes. It's no kidding. Like I had to wait 20 minutes to just see if after I make some changes, I just want to see how it's working in the emulator or the physical device. I had to wait 20 minutes to see it. But then with Flutter, it takes no time. Then there are say other frameworks that can do this, but then I would say like Flutter does it the best. Building blocks of Flutter are actually the widgets. So everything is a widget. So like for something, it's easier for people to understand. So like a button is a widget, a text box is a widget, but then anything else can be a widget as well. For example, hiding something, like the functionality is actually a widget. So you just wrap another component inside, and you can say hide the button or unhide. So which is quite interesting because like I think for Android, it's very difficult to integrate libraries because they are very intervened, but then with Flutter, it's very easy. So you just say it's more like playing Lego. So you just add another widget. And also if like this widget is something like you don't want to use anymore, you can just easily remove it and replace it with another one. I think as Max mentioned before, there are a lot of things good about Dart. So Dart, Flutter is very easy to learn because of the widgets it's using and also because of the language. So if you have some experience with the Java, JavaScript, or any other languages, you will find that Dart is very easy to learn. And also, even if you don't know anything about like coding, I would say it's very easy to learn Flutter as well. The last thing I would say is like this. The last feature of Flutter is like it has a very thriving community. So because like Flutter is open source and many people can contribute to it. So you can say, as a developer, you can create a widget, then release it to the Flutter community, and anyone can use it. Or if you have a question, then you can post it, and there will be someone who can help you. So I think I mentioned, like, for me, like my reasoning for starting using Flutter was the single code base. But then there are like all these other things, I guess, like really helped Flutter becoming the most popular framework for mobile apps. So I think my question I want to throw at you is like, why do you want to learn Flutter? Or if you have started, why did you choose to learn Flutter? I think sometimes it's good to know why. So yeah, we have talked about the pros of Flutter, then how is it really received by the developers? So if I ask a developer, they may say, I don't really care, it's just another framework. It is true, it is another framework, but then I think for like junior developers or even the very experienced developers, I would say most of the people will appreciate the features of Flutter. Something like that. Some of them, they say, I like its write once and run anywhere approach. So if you can say just learn one framework and make apps for multiple platforms, why do you want to say learn Android, iOS, and React Native or React.js to make apps for web or desktop? So you can just, with Flutter, you can just do a lot of things with just one single code base. The whole reload feature gives me real-time feedback and speeds up my development. Yeah, I would say like for developers, the whole reload feature makes a big difference. We don't have to waste time like waiting for the build to come up, and you can see the feedback instantly. Thanks to the widgets, I know I can always bring a designer vision to life, well, most of the time. So I would say, yeah, Flutter is the framework that allows custom design. It supports custom design the best. So whatever the designer wants to achieve, like we can do that. I think when I was an Android developer, sometimes like the designer would ask me, oh, is this like possible on Android? I think with Flutter, they don't really have to ask the question, and I don't have to worry about it. I know that we can either find the widgets or we can just build it ourselves. Yeah, the last thing I mentioned before was like because the building blocks of Flutter are widgets, so coding with Flutter is like playing Lego, so which is quite fun to code. But then to me, like the benefits are like not just the developers can benefit from Flutter, then there are other people like in the team, they can also benefit from the design from Flutter. So how about the designer? So I can effortlessly achieve a cohesive design. So I think nowadays it's quite common for apps to have the same look on Android and iOS. It's quite difficult to do this if you just develop apps natively. But then with Flutter, you can easily do it because of the single code base and because of the widgets they use. And the last thing is like their components, they look great on either platform. You don't really feel that this is Android or iOS. It's Flutter, but then it looks great on any platform most of the time. I don't really have to ask what is possible. Yeah, as I mentioned before, yeah, the designer used to ask like whether this is possible, whether this is easy to do. Now they don't really have to ask. And then, yeah, then it used to be, I think when I was working in say Tabcorp or CBIE, normally designer, they will start with iOS design, then they like have another design for Android. But then sometimes they may suggest like wrong components for Android or iOS because they don't know everything or they don't have to know. So now they don't really have to worry about it anymore. Yeah, so because of all the things, they kind of say like, just do it. So, and how about the project manager or the product owner? I think managing just one team is great for product manager, project manager, or product owners. Imagining like you have, say, a Flutter team of 4, and then you have Android team of 4, another iOS team of 4. it's quite like troublesome to manage two teams. When you have like backlog scoping or retro meetings, you have to do with a large team. And when you do say like effort estimating, you have to do the same with each platform. Then you have to ask sometimes like, oh, I say I need 5 days, Andrew says I need 1, or vice versa. And now you just have to ask the same, just like ask one question to one team. Hiring can be a tricky one because they are like, I think Flutter is still relatively new. There aren't many Flutter developers, but then if like hiring Flutter developers is difficult, try like hiring a good Android developer or iOS developer. So I think it's quite difficult to hire anyone at the moment. I think for project managers, consistency is quite important. With Flutter, you can have the consistent design across multiple platforms. It's very difficult to ensure the user experience is the same on every platform. Then the most important is the business logic is consistent. So when you develop the apps natively, no matter how they look, say in the front end, say like on iOS or Android, even though they look like the same on the surface, but then the logic may be different under the hood because there are different systems. And then sometimes like you may have an issue on iOS, you may have an issue on Android. It's quite confusing to people. But then with Flutter, you have one single base. So you will know the business logic is the same. And then when there is an issue, you can just like fix it for any platform. Then the most important thing I would say, like releasing at the same time is quite important. When you have two teams, I would guarantee that there is one team which is high performing, then the other team is not. So you always have to wait for the other team to catch up, then you can release at the same time. But then with Flutter, you don't really have this issue. You can always like finish at the same time, then release at the same time as well. So for project managers or product owners, they will say I have a strong fondness for Flutter due to its rapid development, appealing design, and cost effectiveness. So we have talked about how like Flutter is received by the people or by the team. Then what does this mean for the businesses? The first thing is like it accelerates the development and enhance quality. With Flutter, the time required to bring a product to market is reduced to 62% compared to working with multiple teams on native apps. And the second thing is like it can boost adoption and revenue opportunities. I think nowadays time is everything. If you can release it to the market like in record short time, then the users they can start using it like quicker, and then it can bring in revenue sooner than you develop the apps natively. And then lastly, it can enhance the customer value and also the satisfaction. With Flutter, you can make sure the design is consistent, the logic is consistent, and also like customers on different platforms, they can receive the app at the same time, which is nice to have. So I think it has been reported by Google that there has been more than 100,000 apps. So you may be using some apps like developed by Flutter, you may not know. Then there are some big names, for example, BMW, eBay, Toyota, and Google. The local biggest adopter is Tabcorp. So yeah, there are lots of news about how like Tabcorp has been a success in using Flutter. So if you haven't read the news, like feel free to read some news after this talk. So now I'm going to talk about the recent Flutter app we just released. So if you have kids, we just made an app for you. So when ChatGPT was released a few months ago, we wanted to use ChatGPT to create stories for kids. So, and then we just released the app like on Thursday. So the app is called My Story Builder, and it has features like, I will quickly talk about the features. So when you come to the home screen, you will see the buttons to create a story. There's a button to purchase credits. And there are also some buttons to allow people to share or to send us an email. So when you create the story, it takes you through like a few steps. So you can choose the story type, choose the characters, where the story happens, the morale of the story, the age of the kids, and also the gender. So then it will call the ChatGPT API to generate a story. So after the story is generated, it will show on the home screen. Then also there's a button to see, I think the past 100 stories. So with the in-app purchase, like we have two options, and also we have the backend to verify the in-app purchases. What you just saw was the parental gate we had to implement. So I think the question I want to ask you is, for this app, how much time do you think is required for the development? So I will review the number in a few slides. So now I'm gonna talk about our journey when we make this Flutter app. The journey starts like the proof of concept. I won't talk about why we decided to make this app. There was like a lot of discussion, but then we will say that this journey started with a proof of concept. What you can see is like a screenshot of the POC we made for this app. You can tell that it's quite different from the final product. So we use Flutter to make this POC app. Then it was, as you can see, like it has the same concept. So the users, they can say configure how they want, how they can make this story. Then we use Flutter. It was quite, I would say it was quite like quick to finish it. Then we were able to test it. Then after that, we decided to move, go ahead with this app. So the next step was to gather the requirements. So during this stage, we will talk about, say, what are the features we have to include in the MVP. There was a lot of discussion, and think even after this stage, we still discuss like what features should be included in this MVP, because some people they have like strong opinions about certain features. But then eventually, yeah, we agreed on the scope, and we were able to move on. So because of this, like this app is relatively simple. So we didn't do the normal, say like start with mockups and then go to high fidelity design. Then we moved straight to the high fidelity design. So this screenshot shows the steps when the user makes a story. So on the top, there's a progress bar. Then for each step, there is like a title, then there are some selections, and at the bottom, there's a floating button. So this is done by the designer. I think what's different from the past is like the designer didn't really have to ask the dev, say, is this possible? I think with the Flutter, the designers and the developers, they are kind of like decoupled now. There is still some collaboration, but then I think the designer can move a lot faster with Flutter now. After we have the requirements, the design, we moved on to the ticket creation. As you can see with Flutter, I don't have to say write tickets for Android, then write tickets for iOS. And if there's a bug, I write another ticket for like bug ticket for Android or iOS. We just have like one set of tickets for the whole team, which is quite easy to do. After we got everything, now is the development time. So can I just ask like a few of you, like how much time do you think we spent on the development? Anyone wants to guess?
2 months.
Okay, 1.
20 days.
Any more guesses?
20 days.
How many?
20 days.
20 days. Okay, so yeah, thanks. So we spent 50 hours. Yeah, so if you say like 8 hours per day, it was like just 1 week. Obviously, it depends on the seniority or the experience of the developers. But then for this case, it was only 50 hours just for the coding part. If we break it down, then there was like for the initial POC, there was like 8 hours, including everything like for that POC I just showed. Then there was about 25 hours for the UI. for the in-app purchase, like 5 hours was for the design and also for linking to different stores. Then we also have like a backend. The backend was like used to verify the in-app purchases. So we had to do it for both Android and iOS. It has to be done separately. Yeah, we couldn't skip that. So there is 12 hours for that. But overall, it was only 15 hours, which was like, yeah, quite fast. So it allows us to move on to the next step, which was to submit the apps to Apple Store or Play Store. So there is a lot of like paperwork for these stores. So after that, I think the natural logic was to say to have the app released, but yeah, it's not the case. I think it was relatively too easy to release on Play Store, but then with the Apple Store, there was a lot of like issues. So Apple complained about like using Firebase Analytics because it has the potential to capture like users information, because like for this app we were targeting kids. So then Apple wasn't very happy with that. So we had to like, just for the sake of release, we had to remove those libraries. Then they complained about the parental gates. Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, this is the first app like we developed for the kids. So I didn't know there's like you have to add a parental gate. So we use like, with Flutter, we quickly, we were being creative. So we used like a widget that was normally for the pin code, like entering. We used the UI components in that. Then just we put the UI components in a dialog that show it. And then Apple was happy with that. Then Apple was also complaining about a bug in 17.1, which is the beta version. I was like, I didn't know I have to test on the beta version. So, but eventually, yeah, the app was like accepted on Thursday, and just in time for this, which was great. So at the end, the app was released. But yeah, the journey didn't stop there. It was a big milestone, but there's a lot of like more work. So since the apps are out there, we can start marketing now to, yeah, because we make apps not just for the sake of making, we want people to use it. So I think the next step is like we will start marketing. Then yeah, for the MVP, there are like many features we couldn't include in the MVP, and yeah, so I think we will, depending on how it goes, and also depending on user feedback, we will add some new features. And then the last thing is like, yeah, Flutter allows us to say make new apps very quickly. So I think this is just one app idea, and we want to say move on to other app ideas as well. So Flutter allows us to do that, which is great. So now I'm going to talk about the cons of Flutter. Yeah, I think like everything else, it's not everything is perfect. So Flutter, even though it claims to be able to make an app for anything where there is a digital display, but then actually it doesn't really support some systems, for example, watchOS, tvOS, or Apple CarPlay apps. Then for the platforms it claims to support, then it doesn't really support well for the web or desktop apps. I would say like Flutter is great for mobile app development, but then when you have a mobile app like developed by Flutter and you want to have like a supplementary web app or desktop app, Flutter is great because you can easily make it happen with just one single base. Otherwise, I wouldn't suggest say you just make a web app with Flutter because there are some limitations. The next thing to me is a big thing is like having larger app sizes. Flutter app is normally bigger than native apps because it's rendering all the components inside the code. So it's not using the native components. That's why the app size is a bit bigger. I think for some people, like the app size matters. The biggest thing I would say is the lack of third-party libraries. If you want like a UI components, Flutter is great. But then for some SDKs, it may be available on Android for Android or iOS, but then it may not be there for Flutter. But then I think things have improved a lot compared to when I started like a few years ago. So I would say like this will change very quickly. Flutter uses say native functionalities of say for example camera geolocation, but then it doesn't support all the native functionalities. And if you want to make some high complexity apps, then Flutter is not good for you. The last thing is not a big thing to me. So for the new OS features, they may not be like very quickly available on Flutter. So you may have to wait a bit. So, but to me, I think it's not a big thing. Now we come to the conclusions. So I think in 2021, Flutter has overtaken React Native as the most popular mobile app framework. And I think right now it's pretty popular. So in my team, I have a lot of web developers who said they have experience like Flutter. They won't say the same for React Native because I think everyone sees the potential of Flutter. The next thing is like, yeah, due to the pros of Flutter, it enables rapid development and reduces time to market. Again, Flutter is not perfect for everyone or every project. So when you start a project, it's important to do your own assessment to see whether Flutter is good for you. And then the last thing is like if you decided to go with Flutter, I would say happy coding. I have to say that I have been less stressed since I started like coding with Flutter, because with Android, I think, I quite often encounter some issues and I couldn't resolve like very quickly. But yeah, with Flutter, I think it doesn't happen very often. So here on this slide, we have some links. So if you want to try to remember names, there is a QR code and the Me Story Builder we just recently released. Then if you want to reach out to me, you can do that on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. So any questions? Yep.
Just on the stakeholders.
Just for the recording.
Okay, sure.
I've just got a question around the slides around the stakeholders themselves. You've got development, the product owner, designers. What about the QA team? What's their experience like testing on the various devices that are out there in market, and to have Samsung device problems as well?
Yeah. So I think I didn't mention. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I didn't mention QA. So for QA, I think there are two parts. One is the testing done by the developers. Then there is manual testing done by the QAs. So with the automation testing, unit testing, it can be done by one developer, by one team now, rather than say you have to do it, write the code for Android and iOS. So I think on that you save a lot of time. With the manual testing, I think you still have to say test on different devices. But then the good thing is like there's consistent business logic. As I mentioned before, like the QAs, they don't really know the business logic under the hood. So sometimes even though they say this is the same feature, but then it's actually quite different on different platforms. But then with Flutter, you don't really have this issue. You may have different issues. Say the UI works on Android and there is like a pixel issue on iOS. I think it's possible, but then in terms of business logic, I think it makes the QA life easier. Yeah.
Any other defects outside of UI potentially, like under the hood?
I can't think of any. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
Any other questions? Just 1 second to get.
How hard is it to use Flutter within an existing app, like an existing native app, for example?
Yeah. So I think Flutter supports hybrid development as well. So I think when I was working at Travelo, I integrated the Flutter into the Android app. So it's the same thing with the React Native. Yeah, you can. So if you have an existing app, you can say like integrate it with Flutter. Then for the new features, you use Flutter for both platforms. Yeah. Or you can. I think Flutter is very popular with startups because they don't have any legacy code, so they can just start with Flutter, and they can have the MVP very quickly.
What's the current state of accessibility support in Flutter?
For this talk, I've done some research. I think it's supporting that very well. But I won't go into too much detail because I think for this app, like we just try to finish it. We didn't say pay too much attention to accessibility or internationalization, but I think it's supporting it very well. Yeah.
Any more questions? Oh, yep.
So I think you mentioned earlier you'd use like quite a few like UI component libraries or something like that. And as someone that's just getting started with Flutter, I didn't realize there were many out there. So do you have any like recommendations or like trying to find those or any you've used that you really like?
Yeah, so I think there is a website I go to, so it's called Flutter Packages. So it has all the widgets. I think there is somewhere of like a popular libraries or widgets somewhere. Yeah, if you do a Google search, you should be able to find that. Oh, I'm not sharing. Okay, I'll quickly share that. Yeah, so this is the website. It has, yeah, you can search any widget, for example, HTTP. This is the most popular one. Yeah, navigation. Yeah. Sorry. Flutter favorites. Is it a widget?
It's a separate web. It's like,
Okay. Yeah.
okay, I'll just chime in here as a Flutter GD. There's also another website, I think it's linked off the main flutter.dev website called Flutter. It's actually a program called Flutter Favorites where like essentially like a community board recommends the set of like, I guess, a curated set of packages that they recommend for people to use as a starting point for any piece of functionality that you're looking for. And that includes both UI frameworks and other functionality.
There's a question there.
Thank you for great presentation. As a Flutter developer, what's your opinion on other multi-platform like KMM?
Sorry, can you say that?
What is your opinion about other multi-platform, for example, Kotlin multi-platform?
Yeah, I will try to answer that question there, and maybe Max can jump in. So I think, yeah, I would say like I'm not very technical anymore. I'm more like a PM. I can still do some coding, but I think that's not my primary focus. And also like this talk is not about say comparing Flutter to other frameworks. My opinion is I think there is a place for all these frameworks because they all have different kinds of pros and cons. Yeah, I would say I think for any like framework, you just have to say understand the benefits and also the limitations, then choose the one that is right for you rather than just because Flutter is popular, then I want to develop this app with Flutter. Yeah.
Excellent answer.
I think with the question around starting with Flutter, there is a website called Flutter Flow, if I'm not wrong.
Yep.
I did play around with that a little bit. It's kind of like drag and drop and you can design a UI, but I haven't tried it like with the production versions, that how it behaves when you integrate with GitHub and then get that code into the proper repository and then try to build business logic on top of that. But yeah, that's another thing you can start.
Yeah. So I think with Flutter Flow, you can just drag and drop. And you can add business logic as well. And yeah, because of the thriving Flutter community, there are lots of tools now. I think one thing React Native did well was the push to the app without release. Now I think Flutter has that as well. It's called, I think there's a tool called Shorebird. So yeah, you can check it out if you want to.
I mean, since you said Apple yanked you up because of Firebase Analytics, what did you end up using? I mean, Firebase has like first-class Flutter support, but
we didn't end up using anything for the iOS app because I think we just wanted to release it as soon as possible because of the deadline. I think eventually I will argue with Apple because I think yeah, I would ask the same question, like what can I use in terms of like try to get some user data to improve the app. So right now we don't have anything for the iOS app.